Welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Brandon, and today we're looking at Slime. Looking at Slime Volume 2 coming out. We wanted to kind of go over some Slime decks in order to be able to help prepare us as we're going forward with that. Normally we do one deck per video, just trying to highlight and show off the deck that we've come up with for the release that's coming out. And with this being a Volume 2, we wanted to kind of address a couple different things with this video. So realistically, this main purpose for this video is going to be to show off the main archetypes you're going to see in potentially some kind of competitive format, whether it's locals or up higher. We have 3 different builds with the Slime 2 release that are generally popular across the board. We have the new 8 standby build, we have the new 8 choice build, and then we kind of have the classic 4 pants, 4 salvage triggers. Realistically, we're going to break down all 3 decks. I'm going to put timestamps in the description to be able to help you move around with the video a little bit to be able to kind of pick and choose what you're trying to look for and what you're trying to see. Starting off, we're going to look at 8 standby. With this level 0 lineup, we have 4 cards that come in from set 1 and 4 different cards that come in from set 2. So looking at set 1 stuff really quick, we have After the Battle Rimuru, which is our Ricky, which means we can pay 1, clock ourself 1, search for a level 1 or lower character and add it to hand. Worth noting that it has another ability as well. You can discard a card, and then if you do that, you can choose a level 0 character on your opponent's board and return it back to their hand. You're really more playing it for the first effect there. You're really more playing it just to get level 1 and keep moving forward, making sure you can control what level you're going to be at to help prevent being level locked, for example, like at 0. We also have Child on the Inside Milim. This is our pay 3 stock swap on play. It is also a level 0 bomb. Be able to get rid of other pesky level 0s, oversizes. Very much a tech card in this situation. We have Last Journey Shizu. Again, another tech card. It's one of that we run. It's a climax swapper, and on attack, you can look at the top 2 cards, choose one to stay on top, put one into the waiting room, and then you attack, revealing the card you put back there as your trigger. Lastly, from set 1, we have Request at the Kingdom of Flintwood Shizu, where this one you can pay 1 to move this card backstage. You can also then pay 1, put this card into waiting room to look at the top 4 of your cards, choose 1 character from among them and add it to your hand. Realistically, it's a really good stock out to change this card into another card. From the new stuff at level 0, we have the Milim Runner, which if all of your characters are Demon Continent characters, which everything in this deck is, it gains 2k power, and at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, it can move to another slot on your front row that's not occupied with a character facing it. So you can run in front of other characters and essentially deny them the extra soul for swinging into an open lane. Being a 3-5 power, you're a bit more on that oversized level, so you can run in front of other people's tech cards and deny them not only extra soul, but you can also keep your board alive a little bit longer and force them to do side attacks. We also have the kind of Milim Brainstormer. If you have the level 3 Climax combo Milim on field, you can discard a card from hand and put this Brainstormer into the waiting room to look at up to 3 cards from the top of your deck, choose 1, put it in your hand, and put the rest in the waiting room. Which is a really interesting end game piece to help kind of play into the end game to help get an event into hand. That's what you're looking for. Either the event or the climax, maybe. So a good way to help get some of the pieces you need in the end game for a little bit more hand fixing. It also is a salvage brainstormer. So when you hit a climax with the brainstorm, you can choose a character in waiting room, add it back to hand for each climax you reveal. So we have this Rimuru, which has on-play surveil. Look at the top card, leave it there, put it in waiting room. It also has, when a climax is placed on stage, you can return this card back to hand. And if you do, you give one of your characters 2k power. So it's a good way to help boost up, especially like your level 1 combo, to be able to get additional power to stand over things. Last up, we have the Soe. When placed on stage, you can discard a card from hand, reveal the top card, and then you can salvage level X based off the level of the card that's revealed. Fun fact, this has a shift ability. So if this card's in clock, you can exchange this with another blue card from hand. If you need more hand filtering tools, you have access to it. When it's needed, it is fantastic, so it's at least worth having for sure. This rounds out our level 0 game. Moving into level 1, we have a total of 5 cards, 2 different variants. We have the level 1 combo, which is a stock charging combo. this card cannot side attack. However, when this card attacks, if you have the standby climax in there, you twin drive. You don't pay the additional stock for twin driving. You just trigger twice for each combo piece you have in play. So if you have 3 combo pieces in play, you're triggering 6 times, basically getting an additional 3 stock that turn. And it's not blind stock, you know what the stock is. Notably, you don't pay anything out in the midst of that, so you need to be very careful about burying climaxes with this combo. We also then run the level 1 Leafa counter with the Shuna. When you use this counter ability, it's a 2k counter, and you reveal the top card of the deck. If it's a character, you can add it to hand and then discard a card from hand. For level 2 characters, this is a very minimalistic approach to this. I run a 2-2 split of these 2-2 standby targets. I have the Geld, where you're able to sacrifice that card in order to give another character 4k power. And if there's characters in your back row, this gains an additional 1,000 power for each character in the back row. So it can get up to 9k by itself, but you can sacrifice one of these to give something else 4k power. So you could potentially keep other things alive and have like a pretty big swing of power across your board. And it's also notably when this character is being frontal attacked. So you can also then deny reverses this way as well. The other 2-2 is the 2-2 Milam, which gains 2k power for each back row character. And then when this card attacks, you can look at the top card of your deck and either keep it on top or put it in the waiting room. You get on attack surveil to be able to potentially either trigger clean or know what your trigger is going to be, or at least know what your trigger is not going to be. So you can have some kind of selectivity going in with that, especially coming out of a level 1 stock charging combo. A very important piece for sure. We also then run the 2-1 Benimaru, which is a memory counter. So it gains 3k, the character gains 3k power when you use it, and when your opponent becomes reversed, you can send that character to memory. So it's a pretty nice way to deal with things that have Encore or other effects, maybe even like Hexproof. This would actually work through Hexproof because it's targeting your character versus your opponent's character. A pretty good denial tool that's really effective in 8 standby. Moving into level 3, we have this early play Shuna. If you have 4 more characters, you can early play it down, heal, and until the end of your opponent's next turn, it's a 10-5 character with a pretty easy early play condition, so you're able to heal in your 8 standby build, which is fantastic. We have the level 3 combo Milam. On play, heal. If all of your characters are Demon Continent, gains 2k power, so it's at 11k. With the combo, this card gains 2 of the following abilities, or gains the 2 following abilities. When your battle opponent becomes reversed, you can pay 2, and if you do, you can choose one of the events, the 3-5 events from hand, and play it as long as you meet the level and color requirement for it. So you can't play the event early. So if you stand by the level 3 out early, you can't use this if you get a reverse. But paying 2 for a 3-5 event is fantastic. And the other ability being, when direct attack, you can pay 2 to deal 2 damage. So even if your opponent doesn't have characters on board, you can still burn an additional 2 with the pay 2. So pretty intensive stock end game. However, also pretty lethal because the event itself that it pairs with, and then you can play for free from hand by paying 2. So you get to essentially pay for the event for 3 less stock. So you have to have a character with Milam and name, which is when it's paired with the event, not a problem. When it's paired with the Climax combo, you have one in play, so you're good there. You reveal 7 cards from the top of her deck, then you shuffle it, and then deal X, X being the number of climaxes revealed. Notably, you're putting cards from the top of deck into clock. You're not dealing damage. So this bypasses things like, with the recent 7 Deadly Sins anti-burn, it bypasses if your opponent reveals climaxes off the top of their deck. You guarantee the damage based off of the climaxes revealed. It sets up for a very lethal end game with this top end. We have for everyone's sake Shuna. This is from the old set. This is a assist in the back row where you can rest it and look at the top 2 cards and put them back in any order. When placed on stage from hand, you can also salvage a character, and it gives everything in front of it 2k power. So able to boost up power in the front row, able to continually assist you with triggers or what's on the top of your deck. So it gives you more additional information every turn that's going to be useful for helping to close out your game. And then last up, we have this Benimaru. On field, it gives all of your other characters 1500 power, so just another way to help continue to boost power across field. When your battle opponent becomes reversed, you can pay 2 to burn 1. A good way to be able to continue to ping additional damage, as well as power pump your entire field, especially because the top end does require a reverse to play the event for 3 less stock. Having additional power is always helpful to guarantee those reverses. Overall, it has a really interesting emphasis on how it wins board, because it wants to win board in most lanes, but it needs reverse targets for the event if you're going for the event route. But if you can deny your opponent having a board, you can just direct attack anyway. So it doesn't need your opponent to have characters on field, but if your opponent has characters on field, you can play with the event. So it has a really interesting kind of dynamic there, depending on what you can do. Because honestly, 11k for level 3 is rather low and is more easily countered than other on-reversed combos. So having additional power in some way becomes very important for this deck. It also helps deny your opponent's reverses as well, with the Orc at the level 2 game, the Memory Kick to be able to help clear some of your opponent's more trickier pieces. You have a lot of interesting denial pieces with this, as well as the stock engine at level 1. Being able to just generate additional stock to help fund this more expensive top end is very, very essential for this deck in making this deck function later throughout the game. So having that additional stock to turn into potentially crazy damage is a key part of this deck. 8 standby slime is very effective at dealing damage at the top, which is something that we've seen as a continual trend that is a necessary aspect for very competitive for more competitive decks in Weiss Schwarz. It's having an end game that can close out a game. 8 choice kind of does the flip side to that. 8 choice focuses more on compression and healing and using field mechanics to ready its end game later. It's really almost going for a 2-turn end game, but on its last turn, it can deal pretty intense amounts of damage to be able to close out a game that way too. It can almost loop its combo mid-combo, which we'll kind of look at as we get a little bit further in. Looking at the level 0 lineup, we have some very similar cards to as before. With the 8 choice build, you notice there are only 2 level 0s that are similar to the 8 standby level 0 game, that being the Child on the Inside Milim and the Last Journey Shizu. Both of those from the old set. We only add one more from the old set at level 0, being Rimuru Tempest, being another hand filter tool to be able to just kind of continue to move through your deck, to be able to kind of just get the right pieces you want into hand, be able to pay out climaxes and salvage characters a little bit more effectively. For me, it's a really good salvage access card, especially early on in the game. From the new level 0s, the new Clean Cut Rimuru, this card is placed on stage. Reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a character, it gains a level and 1500 power. So that way, you know what the top card of your deck is. You probably have a 3/5 clean cut, which should be big enough to get the reverse that it needs to be able to rest one of your other characters and send it to the back row. One of the cards that I really like with this one to be able to save is the Twin Drive Milim. During your turn, if you have another Demon Continent character, it gains 3k power, so you're looking at a 4k power card during your turn that you can pay 1 on attack and trigger twice. So you can pay out climaxes as you go to trigger twice. This allows you to be able to kind of mess around with your stock in a little bit easier way. And it has some really nice endgame benefits too that we're going to talk about when we get there. We have this level 0 Shizu. It's only a 500 power card, but on attack you can grant one of your other characters power, and when it becomes reversed you can pay 1 and rest it, and then beginning of your next encore step, send this card to memory. So when your opponent reverses it, you can pay 1, keep it on field, swing with it again, and even if you lose that lane at the beginning of your encore step, it goes to memory. You can use this as a more permanent version of compression, putting it into memory. It's a power pump, so you can boost other things up to win board in different parts of the lane, even if this card doesn't win board. I find this to be a really interesting level 0 that's worth the input here into 8 choice. We also then have our Brainstormer. When your other character's battle opponent becomes reversed, so whenever you get a reverse, you can give another character 500 power. Especially with this 4K Milim, you can then grant, say, 500 power to the Clean Cut to make that bigger. You can add 500 power anywhere on board to be able to continue to keep your field big as you keep going, which I think is worthwhile. Going into level 1, we have a little bit of a variety here at level 1, partly because we have some very interesting tech pieces here. From the old set, we have the Demon Lord Ramorous, which I think is a very important thing in this set. You're able to spawn out cost 0 characters to field, and then at the end of turn, as long as they haven't been reversed and sent to waiting room, they will go to memory. So a level 1 that you can pay 1, spawn a character from waiting room, so you can continually have waiting room access for level 1 cost 0 and lower characters. So you can effectively go 1 stock to 1 card on field with this Ramorous. I also then run the Anti-Change Bomb Hakuro, really just a tech piece, especially if you're going to be running into a lot of early plays, standby stuff. It's a very useful card to be able to help negate some of the advantage that those cards would bring. Coming into the new stuff, we noticed that the 1/1 Shuna we had in 8 standby as well. This is your Leafa counter once again. For the combo itself, we have, if you have 4 more other characters on attack, you may salvage a character from waiting room, which is fine. It's the really big thing is it's on choice trigger here. And it also says if all your other characters are Demon Continent, gains additional 1,000 power, so it becomes a 6/5 on attack. You can salvage a character. Power threshold's not great. The immediate salvage of any level of character is helpful. The 4 more condition can be hard to meet, which is why we have different tools like the Shizu. You can pay 1 to save on field, the Clean Cut to keep things in the back row. So you're trying to save your zeros early, so that way you can meet this level 1 condition whenever you wish to play out this combo. You also have Ramorous to be able to spawn things into field, so you can have more characters available ready to go. Looking at this 1/1 Hakuro, it's a global assist of level times 500, adding 500 power to level 1s, 1,000 level 2s, 15 to level 3s. The real benefit of running this card, though, when this card triggers a yellow climax, in this case choice, you can choose a character or card in waiting room and put it underneath as a marker. When I have 2 or more markers, I can pay 1 to discard 2 markers to salvage 1 yellow card. In this case, being able to salvage a climax. So I can get my climax for level 3 through use of this 1/1 back row Hakuro. I can also use this as an opportunity to stack non-triggers underneath this. I can use this as an opportunity to help guarantee having my level 3s in waiting room. It's a very fantastic card that helps put 8 choice together. What's worthy to note with this card, though, is that it's markers. It's putting markers underneath this card. So any kind of blink or removal tech decimates this card's abilities with that. That's partly why I also run the Climax Swap in this list. For case matchups where running the back row 1/1 isn't as cost effective as I would prefer it to be. You still kind of go for it even in that matchup, but you kind of force the blink to happen here and force them to deal with this card directly. Using this to be able to compress, putting markers underneath to get into that next deck is also pretty important too, especially when you have ways to pay it out, like the twin driving Milim at 0. Being able to pay out climaxes to then trigger them again to help just stack and stack and stack underneath this card. Really useful in this deck and really helps make this deck function effectively. You really want to try to get this out early level 1, just so you can have it on field longer to be able to, when you trigger, have this card available to let its effects go off. As we get to level 2, we have 2 different level 2s. We have this Rimuru, which is a really interesting Rimuru. From just first glance, I dislike this card very much. But it's really effective in what it does. It's a level 3 killer. So on attack, if it's facing a level 3 or higher, it gains 6k power. And it's only on your turn, so it becomes a 13 on your turn. With the back row, Hawk row in play, you're looking at 14. Relatively big. That's usually big enough to take things out. That's fine. What really gets me is the first ability here. So when you play this card on stage, you can pay the cost, which is pay 1, put a character from Waiting Room to the bottom of your clock, and if you do, refresh, and then it gains additional power. You're removing a lot of your targets. Like your level 1 combo is a salvage combo. Your Ramorous pulls things from Waiting Room. Like the Hakuro pulls cards from Waiting Room to stuff underneath it as markers. Having a Waiting Room is generally a good thing for this deck. So this feels almost very anti-synergistic, but there are definitely situations that refreshing your deck can help save you in some way, can help get you into a much better deck state by clocking yourself 1 to refresh your deck at that point. It is very situational when this card could actually be very helpful to either save your game, to get you out of a bad deck state. I really dislike this card, but it has been helpful in different cases. The other level 2 card we have is the Memory Counter once again. Memory Counter being a very effective tool in removing things from your opponent's board. 3k assist is very helpful. You could continue to run more Leafa, but I think running one of the Leafa and one of the Memory Kick is about the right mix for this, especially for this deck. Especially with as much salvage access as you do have in this deck, you should be able to pick and choose which one you would need and which one's more necessary. It's also very helpful for Red Fix to get that 2-1 into field as well, if you need to. Whether the 2-1 or the early plays. Because as we get into level 3, we have a couple different early plays that we want to look at. From the old set, we have Achieving Vindication, Xion, which is a 2 or less climax and Waiting Room early play. Gains 2k on your turn, and it's a stock healer. Fantastic. We also run the new Shuna for more early play. Heals 2k power till the end of your opponent's next turn, so it's at 10-5. The Xion's 11-5 on attack, 9-5 on defense. Both of those very effective in healing. It's kind of as soon as you get to level 2, you're trying to do these cards. You can try to continue to heal down. When we get to level 3, we have 2 level 3s. We have the combo level 3. When this card is placed on stage by hand or by the card's combo effect, you can heal. Climax combo. At the end of this card's attack, pay 3, discard a card, send this to memory. If you do that, mill the top 2 cards. As long as it's either a character or a yellow climax, you can choose a character from Waiting Room and put it on the slot on the stage where this card was. What's really interesting with this card, and what really makes this card go off, while paying 3 is a pretty steep cost, on attack you gain another stock. So you're really only minusing 2 each time you use this card. And a card from hand. The card from hand can be another copy of this that you can be able to bring back on field. So instead of having it on field already, you're just kind of bringing it back in each time, healing down consistently. So if you're at, say, 3-5, and you play this one down, heal, and you do the combo 4 times, you're back down to 3-1. So there's a really effective heal engine going on back down to 1. What's notable is it's functionally like a restander. Is essentially you're paying a cost, and instead of standing that card back up, you're bringing likely another copy of itself back onto field to swing again. But it's something you can do multiple times, and depending on how much stock you have, something you can do very, very consistently. Because you're running 8 choice, and you're trying to compress down, with the number of swings you have, you're increasing the number of times you could trigger choice. So you could either stock more or get more cards to hand to be able to help set this card up to be able to continue doing it. I think this card pairs really well with the level 0 Twin Drive that we have in the deck already. Because if you Twin Drive, you're giving yourself more chances to be able to trigger choice, to be able to make the combo go off more often, and have enough resources to be able to combo as many times as possible. Which is why it's a really good finishing turn, because you can just kind of spam this lane up to a maximum of having this card in 4 times. So 5, you could have a potential of 7 attacks at most with this card in play without any other additional effects. That's a significant amount of stock, but having the potential to be able to swing 7 times is pretty nuts to be able to do that. A really interesting opportunity to be able to close out a game with this. So you're focusing on healing, you're focusing on compression early. And between healing and compression, it should set you up for a deck state where you're going to be able to trigger choice more often to close out the game. Because realistically, that's going to be your end turn. You're not necessarily worried about triggering choice as much because you want to end on that turn. You're not trying to build up to another following turn. You're ending on that turn, which is why you might try to delay that a little bit. And we have other healing tools as well, like this new Xion, where you can play this one from hand or bring it in by Aranga that we don't play in this deck. It gains 4/5 power, and your opponent can't play assists or hand. Sitting at 14/5 by itself, it's probably going to win a lane. You can also then pay 1, discard a card, on attack heal. To heal, it's effectively a 3 discard 1 heal. However, because it gains that 4/5 power until the end of your opponent's next turn, it's likely surviving an additional turn. So you could probably heal again on that following turn as well, with the on attack pay 1 discard 1 heal. Which is where I think that's where that card shines a little bit more, being able to heal twice with the same card for pay 1 pitch 1. I think there's at least something there worthwhile to check out there. I think that's enough to challenge something very situational again, but definitely a card worth checking out. Notably, your level 3 combo is really only sitting at 11k power. We don't have a lot of power pump in this deck because realistically it's going to go to memory at the end of that card's turn anyway. You're not really worried about winning board as much as you are about dealing the damage and doing it in multiple instances. So that's kind of the 8 choice build. But as we kind of look back a little bit, we reflect back to kind of the set 1 build. I actually have up on screen the deck that we put out for set 1 Slime. As this deck continued to evolve and change as the season went out and more sets came out. So as we look at an updated version of the Slime list from before, this only really adds the level 0 Shizus that we talked about previously in instances of 3, being able to be Shizus that can also get to memory and compress through memory and power pump the field. The rest of these cards are from set 1. There's a couple debates on some of these cards and card choices. We're going to kind of look at some of those choices level by level. Starting at level 0, the 2 cards have been pretty consistent throughout. Things are kind of staple pieces from the old set. We have the Last Journey's Shizu, the Climax Swapper with ability to filter on attack. And then you have the level 0 Bomb Milim, which is also your stock swap. 2 key pieces to be able to effectively move through your deck, to defend your deck, to mess with your opponent's deck, and to be able to affect very specific situations that can come up in play. We can also run with the Ricky, which helps you to control your level, helps you keep going pace-wise where you need to be, helps you get your level 1s in play. You're really going for that hard focus of getting your level 1 combo on field ready to go. You have the Brainstormer, which is a salvage Brainstormer, and on play you can minus 500 to a character on your opponent's field front row. Being able to remove some of those pieces off field before you even begin attacking, able to free up lanes for direct attacks, negate powerful advantages for your opponent with this card. We also have the Trial Deck Rimuru Tempest, being able to hand filter, on play reveal, if it's a character, add, and then discard one. You can also then ditch a climax in order to salvage a character. So you're able to kind of get rid of additional climaxes early, especially when you're running with the Pants trigger. You're going to have climaxes in hand. You can turn those climaxes into characters with this card. We also then run the Chloe, which is additional power on play, becoming a 3/5, so kind of your big piece for level 0. It also has a bond with the mask where you can ditch a card and then search your deck for a mask. The mask being a very helpful utility card that allows you to be able to compress your deck even further. Looking at level 1, there's 4 different level 1 pieces that are very important to this deck. We have the level 1 combo Conqueror Flames Shizu. On attack, mill 2, salvage based off of those levels combined. And then it gains an additional 2k with that climax in play, so it becomes a 7k on attack. Secondary ability, when it becomes reversed, you reveal the top card of the deck, and as long as it's not a climax, you can put it into memory. We also then run this Backroom Potions Rimuru. This Rimuru is kind of like the card for the set, kind of like how Choice's card was the 1/1 Hakuro. This is the primo piece for this set that helps make this set function. Again, also marker-based in its effects. You can rest it to place a character underneath it as a marker, and then rest it again as long as it has a marker under it to put it into stock. It's a 2-turn stock generation piece, but it also has a pay 2 rest and then heal 1, which you can be able to do right away starting at 1. It's a bit more effective a little bit later, but the ability to start healing at 1, you have access to heal immediately, which is a pretty scary thing to see. We also run Demon Lord Ramrus, which is a pay 1 spawn a character with cost 0 from Waiting Room, and at the end of your turn, as long as it's still on field, it goes to memory. If your character becomes reversed, Encore Step happens first, so it would be sent to Waiting Room and not go to memory, but if it is still on field, it can go to memory, so another way to generate that memory compression through the Ramrus. Ramrus also notably gets the level 1 combo, so another way to be able to help and push that level 1 combo into field early, partly for its memory conditions for other cards later. The mask event itself, 1/1 Anti-Magic Mask, also from the Trial deck, gets reprinted in this set as one of the box topper PRs, so you do have access to this card once again with the new stuff. Pay 1, send it to memory, search for a character from your deck. Again, more memory compression. That's really what Slime is focused on here in this deck. Getting that memory, getting that pieces out of the way, ready to go for the end game, trying to build up that wall of compression quickly and effectively. Going into level 2, I run these 2 different cards. The Power of a Hero Shizu. It's a 2/1 frontal assist to level 3s, being able to give them 2k power. You can also rest it to draw a card and then ditch a card. So another way of hand filtering power to your early plays. Pretty fantastic card in this set to be able to help with that power. Help your early plays reach 12, 13k. Very effective at what it does. I also then just run the Leafa counter. On play, reveal the top card. If it's a character, you can add it to hand and then ditch a card. And it's a 2/5 backup. There are a couple different ways you can use this. We have now, with the new stuff, a variety of different counters you can use. There's also even a 1/1 Leafa counter that's only a 2k counter, but it brings it out earlier. With this deck, I think the 2/1 Leafa counter is probably the most effective way. You could bring out the memory counters to deal with different pieces that you come across. You can use it to be able to just increase that power threshold, even just by 500 power more, which could make or break a difference here. I prefer the Leafa counter because you're really more going for cancel than you are for the power, I think, in this instance, especially with Slime. Being able to cancel and be able to stay at level 2 as long as possible, I think, is the play here. So the Leafa counter, I think, makes the most sense. It really makes the most sense at level 2, so having that additional 500 power, same cost, just delayed a little bit. Because realistically, you want your level 1 Shizus to go to memory. You don't necessarily want to back them up. You want them to be reversed so you can get them into memory for free, so you can bring out your early plays. So playing a Leaf counter early doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you want to be reversed. You want those cards in memory, heal, stay at 2, have massive soul wall bodies to swing in and just start pushing damage and trying to maintain that positioning for the rest of the game. So having the 2-1 Leaf, I think, is more important in this deck than the 1-1 is. Although if you need color or need more red fixing, the 1-1 might be the way to go for you. For me, the 2-1 is the important piece. It's also from the trial deck, so maybe access could be something worthwhile to note. The 1-1 coming from the new stuff, the 2-1 being from the trial deck of the old stuff. But I think the Leaf counter is the important part, being able to help mill that additional piece without removing climaxes from deck to help guarantee that cancel. As we go into level 3, we really look at some of our early play pieces here. We have the early play Shizu, which requires 2 of the level 1 combo in memory in order to early play her. On play heal, hand on core, 10-5, as long as you have 2 or more other. So, as long as you're playing Slime's game, you have your back row in place, Shizu in your front row, you are 10-5. If you have the power pump from the 2-1, you're at 12-5, cross turn, back us up to 15. Pretty reasonable numbers at level 2. We also have the 2 or less climaxes in waiting room, early play, achieving Vindication Xion. Early play, it's a stock healer, so discard a card from hand, heal to stock. On your turn, gains an additional 2k power, so it can get up to 13-5 on attack. 13-5 with the back row, sits at 9-5 base on your opponent's turn, so it's more likely to get stepped over, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Especially being a stock healer, you can then turn around and play the other early play Shizu on the following turn, continue that heal, continue to stay at level 2, continue to try to dominate your clock. Kind of reaching into that level 3 territory. I run 2 different kind of endgame pieces. The endgame combo piece, which is your Pursuit Milim, it's a heal climax combo, pay 5, discard 3 at the end of the card's attack. So that way you can burn your opponent for 2 and then restand your card. It's a really expensive top end, so you're really, at most, really running 1 of these. It heals on play, which is kind of going with on theme for Slime. However, it's a very expensive top end to run. And if you focus all of your energy and resources on healing in the mid game, you may not have resources to be able to make this endgame combo close the game. I much prefer, if I'm going to try to close the game, this off finisher, the Dragonoid Milim. On play, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a character, burn 1. So this does fail on climaxes and events. So you really want to get your masks into memory ahead of this card, so you have less of a fail chance with this card. So on play, burn 1. It gains 1,000 power for each of the other characters that attack that turn. Base 9-5 gets up to 11-5 if your other 2 attack. If you can get the reverse, you can pay 3 and then clock kick your opponent. So if you set this up in your opponent's weak lane, there's a very good potential that you could get the reverse, especially if you have the back row assist. That pushes this card up to that 13-5 range, 14 with a climax. So you're able to potentially clock kick here. You also gain the 3 stock throughout the course of the turn, because it's on your opponent's reverse. So if you attack with the other characters first, not only do you gain power, but you also gain the stock to be able to cleanse clock kick with this card. And with these 2 different instances of damage, you can either pull the climax with the burn 1, attempt to guarantee the damage with the pay 3 clock kick, especially if your opponent is unable to back up over it, you're more or less guaranteed that damage. So I much prefer this card when trying to close out a game. It's a bit different than the rest of Slime's game, because the rest of Slime's game is really focused on healing, and staying at 2. But if you're pushed into level 3, you can either play into the healing more and try to close out your game over multiple turns, or if you need to close your opponent out a little bit quicker, I think that the Dragonoid Milim might be the way to go. That's been my personal preference, and I've seen some success with that. So that's the route that I would tend to go. Notably with the Pants salvage list, looking at this list, you're looking at relying heavily on this level 1 combo. Being able to get Shizu into memory becomes the center point focus of this deck and necessary for the rest of the deck to continue as intended. Notably, Shizu fails on climaxes. Having a top check reveal to whether or not your early play condition makes it to the place you need it can be a little difficult, and there will be fail chances. There will be fail times when that does not happen. So when that does not happen, that makes this deck significantly worse. Having ways to guarantee your things is strong, especially if it does not rely on your opponent in order to make these things happen. This level 1 combo with Shizu really depends on your opponent to get your early plays into play. However, if they try to avoid it through side attacking, you're able to loop your combo again and continue generate resources off that. So it's kind of a give or take here. There have been more cards more recently to ways to be able to remove your characters from field or make them not go to memory or to deny them in some way, like clock bombs. Being able to deny the level 1 Shizu from going to memory is a very strong effect and a very big weakness of this deck. A weakness that the other stuff from the new sets really don't have. With 8 standby being able to deal damage that is basically non-cancelable. You can deal damage that cannot be canceled because it's not quote-unquote damage. You're just putting cards into clock. So it has a stronger emphasis on closing out a game and being able to get its pieces off without your opponent being able to intervene. And I think that's the big reason why we're going to see a transition for this set of Slime away from this older deck. While it's still good and while it still has potential, I think we're going to see that shift more towards that 8 choice and 8 standby builds. I think we're going to see a pretty heavy split between 8 standby and 8 choice as regard to kind of which deck people are playing. I think 8 standby is going to be the more competitive deck, in part because of how dependent 8 choice is on the back row Hakuro and the marker compression in a current meta which can deal with marker compression very effectively. I think people are going to look at 8 standby that doesn't need that as a big opportunity for this deck to continue forward. Being able to win board, close out a game effectively, deny your opponent reverses is going to be very important going forward, with especially as many reverse-dependent things that exist in Weiss. Being able to shut off a lot of those to still get your game plan off and deal damage that is unable to be denied is going to be a very big selling point. So if we look at Slime overall, effectively looking at this new stuff coming out, I suspect, based off of the 3 different builds that we really have here, I suspect Standby is going to be the most popular build. 8 choice is going to fall up close behind, and then there'll still be some that will still be playing this kind of old set, this old list. But it's probably going to be in that order of seeing these cards in play. But I would definitely be keeping an eye out for Slime as we look forward. As we look at it like this from a competitive level, 8 standby is pretty strong. 8 standby being able to compete at high stages, I think standby can compete at a high stage. I think 8 choice can also compete at a high stage, but I think it's going to fall just short of the 8 standby builds, depending on how heavily they lean into the back row Hakuro. I think that choice endgame is going to be able to deal a significant amount of damage. The 8 standby does have a significant cost with some of that, but I think it generates enough resources to be able to pull that off consistently in order to make that happen. So 8 standby, very competitive. 8 choice, very competitive. Pant Salvage did really well in this last tournament season, and I think still has potential to do well, but I think that there's a lot more variance with this Pant Salvage list that is going to push it out of that top tier because of the other things that are already in play from the same set. So that's been Slime. That's the 3 different builds that are really going out and we're going to probably be seeing as Slime continues to come out later this year. Which list has struck your interest as Slime begins to come out and continue to hold its own in the presence of some of these top tier decks? On Thursday, we're going to have some gameplay of Slime. And then next week, we're going to be back with a clock talk and 5 cards, 5 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a good one.